Alcohol had to do its job on me before y'all could do your work with me. The only thing that was going to convince me that I was powerless over alcohol was alcohol.
Well, hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic, and we are glad you are all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery as a whole and newcomers to this podcast. Sober Speak is a podcast about recovery centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My job here on Sober Speak is simple. My job is to provide a platform to the amazing stories of recovery all around us. Consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. Please remember, we do not speak for AA or any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope with those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want and leave the rest at the curb for the trash man to pick up. Hello, you incredible souls out there. That was the voice of Mr. Gary K., who many of you have heard before, which you heard at the beginning of this episode, and you will be hearing so much more from him in just a moment. But first things first, on this here episode number 169 of Sober Speak, this episode is brought to you by, sponsored by, presented by, however you want to say that, Marcos and Tanya and Ronit. You know what Marcos and Tanya and Ronit did? Well, let me tell you, they went to our website, www.soberspeak.com, and they clicked on the PayPal. What happened to my voice there? And they they clicked on the PayPal tab at the top of the Sober Speak website, and they made a contribution. So thank you so much, Marcos and Tanya and Ronit. This episode is coming right out to youans. From my heart to you, from my heart to yours, I so appreciate your generosity. I, John M., will be the chairperson for this meeting between meetings, and I am truly honored to serve all of you listening in. So take a seat, if you will, around this virtual table, and let's get started. Once again, if you are new to the podcast, and we get so many of those at the beginning of the year, you know, people make the New Year's resolutions and all that sort of stuff. And let me say this. You know how, at least in a normal year, not this year, but in a normal year when January comes along, and perhaps you are a member of a workout facility, gym, whatever you want to call it, and you notice that in December, the gym was practically empty. And then you get up to January, first January, February, and part of March, it just gets like there's wall-to-wall people. Everyone's made their start into the new year. They're going to lose weight or be healthy or whatever they're going to do, right? Well, when I experience that, I'm always hoping, well, I just wish that the newcomers would go back to their homes and let me have my space in the gym again. So I'm sure many of you have experienced that in the past. But it is different when you talk about the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous or Al-Anon or any of your 12-step groups, or you talk about this podcast. When this podcast comes along in January and we get all the new people flooding in, I am praying that they stay. And not for me, but for them, you know, that they can somehow find a new way of life. And when the rooms get more crowded in Alcoholics Anonymous, when January comes along. I am hoping and praying that those people find a way out and we welcome them in. It's not like a gym membership. But nonetheless, if you are new to the pod, you'll know I'm very hip because I say things like the pod. And then I say like the ep. The ep is an episode on the pod. But nonetheless, if you are new to excuse me, I'm trying to say le programme in a French kind of accent, but it's not really working. But if you are new to le programme and you want to follow us on Instagram, just go to at Sober Speak, all one word, in La Instagram. If you want to be in our super secret Facebook group, just send me your email. Yes, your email that is associated with your Facebook account. Remember, it always has to be associated with your Facebook account. Send that email to me at johnjohn@soberspeak.com and we will get you in there. There are plenty of amazing, like-minded friends of Bill W., Al-Anon, and other 12-step programs in there. You don't have to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous in there. We would love to have you in there if you want to be there. So I want to tell you a little something here. I try to make this thing as, as fun as we possibly can, but I also want to keep it real in that when I came out of the holidays, and I've been through this before, and I don't know exactly why, but here's what I can tell you. I am a creature of habit. I like my dull, boring routine. And when I came out of the holidays this year and I was going back to work, I had taken some time off work, and so I was going back to work and, we were just kind of getting a schedule started. I can tell you that for whatever reason, I went into a funk. And when I say a funk, it was a depression. It started right after the holidays, and I couldn't really put my finger on it. And sometimes I do everything that the program asks me to do. Like I work with others. I take inventory. I ask God to remove my fears or my resentments. I talk with my sponsor about it, which I did. I talk to other people about it. I actually bring it up at meetings. I do everything that the program asked me to do. And there's this funk that just will not go away. And has that ever happened to you? My guess is there's folks out there that is happening to right now, or has happened to in the past, or will happen to in the future. And I just want to say that today, at least, I feel better. Who knows? I could go down the tubes tomorrow. But, I went to a step study this morning. Like I said, I talked to my sponsor this week. I've tried to be kind to those about me. I'm sharing with y'all. I've shared with many people. I simply follow the process that has been laid out by Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm messing, not just Alcoholics Anonymous, right? We're not the first ones to think about this stuff, but there are other people who have thought about maybe not the process in the way that Alcoholics Anonymous has done it, but they have definitely talked about all the principles that are in AA for a long time. And so anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. If you're one of those that is struggling with depression here over the first of the year, perhaps you can relate to me. Here is I wanted to throw this out here also. Miss Crystal wrote in regarding the episode from last week. And by the way, the episode from last week was Brian P. It's episode number 168. And episode number 168 is Brian P. discussing steps 1 and 2 of Alcoholics Anonymous. And Crystal says, "Hi, John, ! I love Brian's message, ! He is another wonderful speaker, and I'm looking forward to continue listening to his experience in the steps. Keep up your amazing work and all the service you do. You are my favorite or this is my favorite podcast by far." And then a couple of big, strong arms, the guys flexing their arms, like for strength. Well, thank you, Crystal. I appreciate it. And you know what? I actually went back this week, and I don't always do this. but I wanted to listen to Brian because I remember it's been a while since I recorded him, and I was listening to him on episode number 168, just a little reminder, and I was thinking, this is some good stuff. I am recording some really awesome stuff. I really ought to go back and listen to this sometimes. I mean, it's just absolutely wonderful what Brian P. did and the way he explained steps 1 and 2 and just how he articulated it. And anyway, Crystal, I appreciate you writing in. Brian P., if you're out there listening, I appreciate you and what you have contributed to this podcast thus far. And we will definitely be having Brian back on the podcast to talk about some of the additional steps. And then I wanted to share this. I have a review on iTunes. Apple Podcasts is what it's called. And the review says, awesome. It says, I was looking for information on alcoholism. I came across this great podcast. I listen to this podcast daily, and I really listen to many of the sessions. This truly is a meeting in between meetings. John does a remarkable job at keeping the audience engaged. The speakers and their stories are remarkably wonderful. I will continue to listen to these podcasts, and I'll recommend them to anyone. Oh, I would recommend this to anyone you know who is looking for help. And then assigned by, or it's, the ID, it says Mama Bear via Apple Podcast. So I don't know exactly who the person is, but Mama Bear, if you're out there listening, I sure appreciate you writing that review in Apple Podcasts. All right, now on to our session, our episode. And this episode is from Gary K. And this is from a live session that we did with Gary K at a live event we had. It's called Sober Speak Live. By the way, if you're not on my email list and you want to get on it, write me once again, John, John at soberspeak.com. I'll get you on that list. And when we have these live events, you can come in and join us. But this is Gary K at a live event, and he talks at length about action and transparency. He talks about the secrets and the danger of keeping secrets, bondage of self. He talks about fear. He addresses trust and so much more, ladies and gentlemen. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. Gary K. And once again, we will have plenty listener feedback at the end of this ep. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic. Hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. This is Sober Speak Live. To remind us of why we're all here and to focus our thoughts on that purpose. We ask that all who would care to, please join me in a moment of silent meditation, followed by the serenity prayer. Serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women, extremely good-looking men and women, I can tell you from looking at this group right here, who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. We do not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorse nor oppose any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. As I mentioned earlier, this is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, which means that anyone can attend. All right, Mr. Gary K. Well, welcome to Sober Speak Live. We are so glad you are here. You are the man. So go ahead, introduce yourself, Mr. Gary. And if you would, give your sobriety date and also tell people what area of the country you hail to us from, if you would, please.
We would do. Hello, everybody. I am an alcoholic. My name is Gary, and I am really, 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 really grateful for a sobriety date and a new life that started July 25th of 1994. I live in a little town right now due east of Dallas, about 90 miles, Sulphur Springs, Texas.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started with your story, Gary. So, I know quite a bit of it because we've been able to spend probably 6 or 7 episodes together now. And I truly have enjoyed very much getting to know you. But let's just go ahead and kind of reset, if you will. So why don't you go ahead and tell people a little bit of your background. And the piece that I really, quite honestly, am most interested in is you talked about your relationship with your father growing up. And I also am interested in the fact that you were a Methodist pastor and you're a counselor and your background there in terms of vocation. So you want to go ahead and just start off there?
I guess I can do that. I was raised out in West Texas in Odessa. Went off to college to Texas A&M. Where I did graduate with the rest of my class in the 5th year. Went to a couple of graduate schools. I usually tell folks, John, that if I had a wall here, I could just about paper that wall with college diplomas and licenses and certificates. And if I had a marriage license, the wall would be just plumb full. The background, John mentioned I was a Methodist pastor for 14 years, psych therapist, several other careers. But I'll tell you, if you're new here, while I was getting the education for those careers and while I was learning all that wonderful stuff, the more I learned, the drunker I got. So none of that played a hand in me being able to get sober. It's good experience to look back on and draw from now.
So, Gary, do you think that all those degrees in education actually acted as an impediment to getting sober? Or would it, what's your thought on that?
I really don't have one. I used to say, I could be so smart, but the impediment, if you're new here, and I try to share this every time I tell my story. I came in with a belief I didn't even know I had that I could learn recovery if I just read enough and journaled enough, maybe if I went to process groups, maybe if I had the opportunity to talk about, all of my childhood and all of that stuff, I could learn recovery if I could hear the right person, get the right book. And I'm so grateful that I got sober out in West Texas, where I jokingly say half the people in the room couldn't spell cat if you spotted them 2 letters. But they could do something I couldn't do. They knew how to live a happy, useful, joyful life sober, and I couldn't do that. And I'm grateful that what I experienced in here is that, and I really, I guess, warn people about that from time to time. I could not learn recovery. I had to experience recovery. And I simply use as an analogy, I did not learn my alcoholism. I experienced it. I did not learn my descent into the pits of hell. I experienced that day by day, behavior by behavior, drink by drink. And when I got in here, I was in a real hurry to try to learn my way into recovery. And in my experience, this is not a program of learning, it's a program of doing. Action is one of the 2 most spiritual words in our program. So what I've experienced is that I had to take action.
What's the other word?
Transparency.
Action and transparency. We'll talk about transparency. What do you mean by that?
I mean, prior to getting to you folks, and a lot of the time since getting here, I'll back up. I use very often that first description of us in the first doctor's opinion, and then when Bill begins to write, and he said it didn't satisfy us to be told that we were in full flight from reality, uh, outright mental defectives, and maladjusted to life. You remember that? If you're new here, I always say, welcome to AA. However, he says very quickly, that doesn't make us alcoholics. We have to go ahead and discover that we have the allergy of the body and we've got that obsession of the mind. But what I mean by transparency is this, and you have to look at your own lives. I have found out by doing the inventory, by coming all the way in, sitting all the way down, and staying here, that I was really maladjusted to life before I ever took my first drink. Alcohol did not make me into the person I became. I already had a good background in that, and part of it was maladjusted to life. You know, you've heard nearly every speaker you've ever heard say as a kid they always felt different. And I don't know if every kid doesn't feel different, but I just know I was thinking of myself most of the time. And part of my maladjustment is I had secrets. Long before I took my first drink, you know, I was always had some secrets that I was making sure people didn't find out about, starting with mother and daddy and then family members. And then even when I got friends, I always had secrets. And when I got into Alcoholics Anonymous, I found one of the reasons I was always spiritually sick was because of the stuff that I was trying to hide from other people. You know, you'll hear it said in meetings that secrets kill us. Well, my understanding of that is that when I've got a secret, John, that means the keeping of my secret is more important than me being at one with any other person. And so there's no opportunity for intimacy of just being with people. And that's a great description of a spiritual sickness, living alone in the universe. You know, I'm with other people, but really never can be a part of them. So I got in here and discovered I had to start becoming transparent. I can't withhold things. You know, my first sponsor told me that. And he said, you're not going to do it all at once, but you're going to start doing it little by little by little, because unless and until you come in here and get in the middle of that book and start living a transparent life, you're not going to be able to get and stay sober. And once you're in here and you're doing that, if you start to withdraw again and you've got secrets in recovery, you're not going to be able to stay sober.
Amen, Brother Gary.
So that's what I mean by transparency, and it's action. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to unload my fifth step off on you folks tonight. But it does mean that there's not one thing in my life that if I'm sitting down with another man or a woman taking them through these steps, I don't have any secrets anymore that I'm afraid to share. And I still meet with my sponsor for an hour every week. And that man knows everything. He knows what I'm thinking about. He knows the things I've done. And it's good. I learned, probably it's been the last 15 years. I'll tell him stuff now I'm thinking about doing. And the good news about that, y'all try this sometime. I've been considering it in my mind all week. I think I'm going to do this, or I'm going to go meet her, or I'm going to go make this potload of money this way. And in my mind, it sounds really good. But when I say it out loud, it's kind of like, whoa, that doesn't sound all that good. You know, I have to hear myself saying my stuff out loud. And when I do that, most of the time, he doesn't have to say a word. I get to hear it, but Haven't you noticed for yourself stuff we talk to ourselves about in our heads sounds so much more differently when it comes out of our mouths out loud? So that becoming and staying transparent has been exceedingly important for me. I believe it's one of the two action words, or one of the two words along with action that simply have to happen for us to live free of alcoholism. One might find a way to live free of alcohol and maintain a lot of secrets, but I want to be reminded all the time I do not have the illness of alcohol. I have the illness of alcoholism. And it's a physical, mental, and spiritual illness, but it's mainly spiritual. And the thing that'll keep me spiritually sick is not so much the things that I do, but the things that I do or I'm thinking about doing that I refuse to share with anyone else.
That's right. So I want to talk a little bit about one of your episodes was called, we decided to entitle it A Spiritual Hygiene. And it's one of the most listened to episodes that we've ever had on Sober Speak. It obviously struck a chord with a lot of people. And we were addressing step 11. But I want you to talk a little bit about that term that I had never heard that term before you used it. Talk to me about what you mean when you're thinking about spiritual hygiene.
Well, it comes from a question first. Do any of you remember a time when your life really did stink? And it doesn't have to be the day you walked in here. You know, I've had a stinking life some while I've been here. And for me, this is a very practical, a very pragmatic, simple, pragmatic spiritual program. Now, the example I used was earlier on that is that I happen to be a grandfather. And many of you have children, nieces, nephews, little kids. My granddaughter, in my eyes, is probably about the most brilliant child that's ever lived. I know I'm probably a little biased there. But, you know, as brilliant as she was when she was young, when she started things like brushing her teeth, I'm figuring it took her mom and dad probably about a year to get her into the habit of doing that daily as a part of her routine. You know, and y'all remember that, buying the kids' toothbrushes and the children's toothpaste and all that. But, you know, it's good hygiene. Most of you brush your teeth every day. Now, I didn't always do that when I was drinking, but what I mean by spiritual hygiene, if I don't brush my teeth in the morning, and I do that, and I shower more than once a week these days. You know, I shower once or twice a day, many days. I wear deodorant. I know about the value of physical hygiene. And if I don't do that stuff, my life's going to stink. I'm going to be around people and my breath is going to run them away, or my odor is going to run them away. I know the value in relationships of good physical hygiene. You know, when I worked, I kept a toothbrush at the office. Many of us carry breath mints. I live in Texas where we sweat a lot, so I carry a can of that body spray around. I know about good physical hygiene. Well, I've got to have good spiritual hygiene. The same way I would no more get up and leave the house in the morning without brushing my teeth. I don't want to get up and leave the house in the morning without brushing my spirit, without doing that 11th step of the spiritual hygiene. And I'm going to finish all the way through that 11th step throughout the day. Sometimes it tells us we have to pause. Well, throughout the day, physically, sometimes I'd pop a breath mint or I'd use some of that spray. I got to do the same thing with spiritual hygiene. You know, some prayers throughout the day. I start to get a little angry or a little afraid or a little agitated. Pause and do that 10th step right. So that, and at night, I'm going to clean my body. I'm going to brush my teeth again. Well, why not do my spiritual hygiene and do that 11th step and review my day in the evening before I go to sleep? So that's what I mean. Just a very pragmatic thing. And I'm telling you, if I don't do that, you know what happens? My
What?
life stinks. My life stinks. Maybe my breath is good, but I get short tempered with people, or I go out leaving the house that morning thinking about what I can get for myself rather than what I can add to the lives of other people. I have to do daily spiritual hygiene if I don't want to stink in life. And I don't want to stink in life anymore. It's just a simple thing to do to get into that 11th step until it's just part of my life. And just like I was talking with one of my sponsees today, I believe I was in here about 11 months. I'd already completed my first ninth step, but I was here about 11 months before I was in the routine of every day doing the same 6 simple things that I do each day. I didn't just do it and in 2 weeks had it down. It took me about 11 months to get those behaviors down. And Bill talks about them on page 88 of the big book. We allow God to discipline us in the manner that we've just outlined. And there's a big difference between discipline. If you discipline someone, it's done for their benefit. Punishment is done for the benefit of the one who's doing it. Well, I don't have in any shape, form, or fashion of punishing God, but I've been given this design for living, and that's a discipline for me to work into. If that makes any sense or an answer to your question.
It does.
Take the word spiritual, folks. Cross out the first 3 letters, and what you're left with is ritual. Having some spiritual rituals that I'm going to surrender to on a daily basis make almost every day of my life a gift beyond anything I could have ever imagined that I was going to have before coming to you people. And I shared in a meeting last night, I've kept the same sponsor for 25 years in 2 months. And one reason I keep him is because he doesn't ask me to do anything that he doesn't do. And he doesn't do much. We do the same things repetitively. It's called 10 and 11, I think it's page 83 where it says the spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. Well, for me, that's 10 and 11. That's what we have to live. And when I get into the discipline of living those 2 steps, life's pretty darn good most of the time. But the best part about it is most of the time, I may not be helping a lot of folks, but by God, I'm not hurting people the way I used to. And that makes life pretty good.
That does. I want to ask you something, a little kind of a curveball here. So I get people writing in regarding your voice on a consistent basis. They talk about your drawl and the tone that you have. Were you like, I don't know, 6, 7 years old and started talking like that, or when did it come about?
Hell, I must have been about 47. That's when I got sober. So maybe that's when it changed. I don't know.
Well, have you had a lot of people talk about your voice, say you have a radio voice or whatever throughout your life?
Yes. And they'll also tell them it's only good for talking.
What does that mean?
I can't sing. I can't do any of that stuff. I can just talk, So I told my mother when I was 16 years old, I came in for my 3rd day of working in the oil field in West Texas. You used to go to work when you were big enough to do it. She asked me about the day, and I said, Mother, I don't know what I'm going to do for a living, but I know I'm not going to work for a living. I'm going to find some way to talk for a living.
That's great. Yeah, I was watching a special last night, and it had Billy Gibbons on it from ZZ Top, and he actually had the same kind of voice that you have, but he could get up behind a mic and actually keep that voice going. But that's not your gift. Obviously, God gave you the talking voice, not the singing voice.
I've been drunk with Billy Gibbons one day.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I would like to hear you two talking to each other.
Well, they were the band at a private party that I went to. And so we weren't doing anything but sharing the party and a lot of stuff. We were doing a lot of things I probably don't even need to talk about on here, but y'all probably have an idea what they were.
Yeah, you guys could have had a who has the most baritone voice contest. I don't know who would have won. But didn't you say also that you were sitting in I
was in San Francisco going out to speak at a conference last summer and was talking to someone, and somebody stopped me and said, "Are you Gary Kay on Sober Speak?" I said, "Well, yeah, I reckon I am." They said, "I recognize that voice anyplace." We had a great conversation.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So, okay, another thing, getting back to on track here, because I can go off track very easy, as you know. Another thing I heard you say one time was, how'd you put it, that steps 10 and 11 are not for, quote, extra credit. And I think I understand where you're going with that. But what did you mean by that? They're not for extra credit.
For me, they are the daily program. They are the daily surrender. Step 10 is just 4 through 9 over and over again. If you read it, it says we continue to watch for resentment, fear, dishonesty, resentments. That's what I just got through doing in 4 through 9. So I need to continue that. I met a few people in AA that seem to come across like they've been just made pure as the driven snow. I've got my doubts on that, but I'll tell you that I'm sure not one of them. I need a program for living, and I need a program for living where I can be somewhat useful to other people. And in order to do that, 10 and 11 are not for extra credit. The steps for me are not like a college assignment. Too often I believe they become that for people. And we've got all kinds of treatment center and AA member and AA guru types. And we've got counselors. They've all got these handouts and all that stuff on the steps. And I share with people, we've got a book. It says right there in the foreword, to show others precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. And Bill's going to go over that several times. And then he's going to tell us later on clear-cut directions are given. So the steps aren't an assignment. It's not a psychological exercise I'm doing here. I think, John, you asked that question about education. One of the things that maybe helped me, and I didn't even know it in the beginning, is that I was a good therapist. I always did well in school. I knew all of that stuff.
What kind of therapist were you, Gary?
Individual and family for the most part.
Okay.
I wouldn't see alcoholics. I got a bunch of them in, and if I had the evaluation and I determined they were alcoholics, I'd tell them, I'm not going to work with you on what you think your problem is, because you've got a bigger problem. There's no need trying to work on your marriage or on your, I love it to people that want to do anger management, all that stuff. You better take care of the problem that's killing you. And I would try to give them a referral to the 12-step group that they needed to be in, or some other place.
Was this before you got to Alcoholics Anonymous?
This was after. I got my license back after I got sober.
Gotcha. Okay, so I got you off track there. You were saying about your education.
I just knew somehow inherently that alcoholism, this illness that I have, this threefold illness, this physical, mental, and spiritual illness, I inherently knew it is not a therapeutic illness. and it will not respond to a therapeutic answer. It is a spiritual illness, and it must have a spiritual answer. And for so many, I think a lot of the psychobabble stuff that we mix in with recovery just keeps us off track and throws us off track. And the program out of our book is a very simple, pragmatic program, and it's going to bring about a spiritual change. So I don't need to spend a lot of time working on childhood trauma or any of that stuff. I need to find a way to be changed and have nothing to do with the change. And in doing these steps, I discover things about myself that I wasn't going to discover in any other way.
Okay, so you're going to have a lot of people listening to this podcast since we're going to make an episode out of this, and you probably have people that are on the meeting right now. So I just want to go ahead and clarify that. Are you saying that, in your opinion, at least, that well, let me rephrase the question. How do therapy or counseling or whatever and such dovetail with Alcoholics Anonymous? Do you think is good for people in that arena?
Oh, yeah. People that are doing their job. A therapist can genuinely help someone discover what their problem is. But if it happens to be a spiritual illness like alcoholism, they have a hard time taking us to a spiritual answer. Therapy can legitimize. Therapy can help me legitimately say, I am this way because of this. And then, so what? Now I know I'm that way, but nothing has changed. Spirituality transforms, or if you will, forgives. I don't just need to know I'm this way because I need to have some vehicle that will move me from the way I am to the way I believe that we're all created to be. Bill's got a real good statement for it in our third step. That's why 60 to 63 is a part of my daily spiritual hygiene. Relieve me from the bondage of self. And that's what I need. And we're not about in AA blaming anyone for this illness. We're not saying I'm this way because of, doesn't do any good to blame. There is no blame. What I need is recovery. I don't need to pinpoint, why I'm this way. Bill has that in the second chapter when he's saying, by now, all of you must be asking, what do I have to do? He doesn't say, all of you must be asking, why am I this way? I need to find out the actions that I can take that will transform me. And I don't need to understand that. I need to experience it.
So let's talk about that phrase there, relieve me of the bondage of self. Obviously, that's in the third step. And it's right there on page 63 as part of the third step prayer. I get what that says conceptually, right? But I want to hear it from you. When you think about relieve me of the bondage of self, how does that manifest itself in my day-to-day life? What does that mean? Relieve me of the bondage of self. And why is self considered bondage?
Well, I'm not sure it is. But the bondage of a self-reliance leaves me in bondage to self. And why do I have that? I'm not going to know it when I pray the prayer. And I want to make that very clear. When I get to the third step for the first time, I don't even have a clue what bondage of self is. I've been introduced to it in the chapter There Is a Solution. And one of the first lines that I could really identify with in the book, we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. I didn't need a dictionary for that. When I got brought into the rooms, I didn't realize it, but I had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as I was living it a long time before I came in and picked up a chip. But that was just a general, this is how I feel. And it came out of me at that time in shame, guilt. And we get a little further in the book after that prayer, and he's going to tell me how the bondage of self looks like for most alcoholics, and it's called resentments. That's bondage of self. And then we got bigger ones called fears. And right there on the page before the third step prayer, I'm glad that he says it that way, 100 forms of them. It's not going to do me any good to try to pick out what it is. I'm in bondage because the fear, this gets some people, the fear is made up.
What do you mean made up?
Well, I'm afraid of things, and I go into my mind and I start describing to myself the consequences that are going to occur most likely. And that becomes fear. I'm not going to sit down and have a discussion with my wife about how I believe that I need to make some changes in my life and I'm going to need her help. And I've never been able to say to her before, I'm scared, would you help me? And I get an idea, I'm using that for an example. Maybe I need to do that. And then I start thinking about things like, if I do that, she's going to think I'm a whelp. She's going to think I've been saying, and I start telling myself all of these things. So I'm making up to fear. And the thing the fear always does, I now see it, is it prohibits transparency. I heard somebody early on say, I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. I'm who I think you think I am. And so I go around life, damn near every alcoholic I've ever met has had a long career of mind reading. Now, I know none of us are very good at it, but by golly, we're persistent at it. And so I'm always going to be reading the situation or reading someone else's mind and then making the decisions of what am I going to reveal or not reveal? What am I going to do or not going to do? And so I'm in bondage to me. Well, a resentment is certainly bondage to self, And I know we may have newcomers on here that have suffered. And believe me, there are people who suffer trauma from other people, physically, spiritually, mentally. We're never saying to someone that, if you were abused as a child or as an adult, that somehow you're to blame. The program never addresses that. But what the resentment of reliving that over and over again, and remember, a resentment is not necessarily anger. Resentment's just something that I replay over and over and over again, and it'll generally tell me that you're not any good, or to tell me that I'm not any good. I just replay it, replay it, replay it. And so that makes me in bondage to events that have happened in the past. And then how many times have you been in a meeting just recently and you'll hear members of AA say things like, well, from the way things have happened in my past, I just find it so hard to trust people today. I just find it so difficult to give someone my trust. You ever hear that statement?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'll share with you, if you're new, this program is saying you've had that wrong your whole life. Our whole life, at least I was getting information from the religious side of things that you're supposed to love God and trust people. And I've had it backwards forever. I'm supposed to trust God and love people. Human beings are always going to be doing things. If I'm putting my trust in them, I'm screwed. So I've got to eventually move to where I'm going to trust God. And how does an alcoholic trust God? Well, in my experience, our book says it starts with that third step. It starts with that prayer. I'm going to turn my thinking and my actions about my alcoholism and about my life over, not to God. We don't just say, "Here, God, you take it." We turn it over to the care of God. And I was shown the way an alcoholic turns their will and their lives over to the care of God. It's called steps 4 through 12. Do these things. As scary as they are, or if you're like I am and you happen to come in here with a bad case of brilliance, as stupid as they sound, do them anyway. And why am I going to be willing to do them? Well, by this time, hopefully, when I'm at step 3 with the sponsor and we've been reading the book out loud together to get to this point, I have begun to make the discovery that the way I was living just didn't work out all that well. So maybe I'll become willing to try to take some actions that seem like they don't make any sense, but I'm going to try them anyway because I know what I was doing didn't work.
Right here. All right, Gary. So last question. You have people that are listening to this in all 4 corners of the world. Some are what they call sober curious nowadays, which I think is a very interesting phrase. I don't know why they'd be sober curious if they didn't have a drinking problem, but nonetheless, you have people that are sober curious. You have people that are actually more than sober curious. They've been in and out of AA, and possibly they realize that AA is not for them. You have another subset that is definitely in AA. They'd like to get sober, but unfortunately they keep trying and just falling down time after time. Really, all I want you to do is kind of share your experience, strength, and hope to that group regarding your experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. And really, I'm trying to get to the people that are hurting out there and just need a little bit of hope. So why don't you go ahead and share on that?
I go back. I only think we've got 2 kinds of people that come into AA. We have convicted felons and we have unconvicted felons, and that's about all we've got. I don't know anybody that's sober curious. Now, they may be saying that. That may be some of that lack of transparency. But I tell you what, I just don't see this as a place that people are social climbing to. I don't believe that I've ever met anybody, if you happen to be new or you're asking those questions. I've never met anybody that said something like, my life's going really, really well, but I'd like to become a better human being and find out ways to gain some tolerance and understanding of other people and to be of service to the world. I think I'll go to AA. I just don't think it happens that way. My friend Ricky says that I need to be reminded the only reason I'm in AA is because I ran out of a burning house. There's no congratulations for being sober. What I did and what any of you did, it's like we were in a house that was on fire and all we did was run out of it. That doesn't take all that much courage. It doesn't take all that much good sense. So I would say to those people that you're talking about, if you believe that your life's just fine, and if you believe that you can control and enjoy your drinking, then I highly suggest you don't come to AA. Our book, and this may sound hard to some people, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous never says don't drink. There's going to be 3 times in the book it's going to tell us, we suggest you go drink. And my answer to your question, John, is this. Alcohol had to do its job on me before y'all could do your work with me. The only thing that was going to convince me that I was powerless over alcohol was alcohol. And that's got to be each person, I guess, their own come to Jesus moment. Alcohol's got to do its job. And I don't try to get with new people and talk them into doing recovery. I'm not one of those people. Recently there have been people wanting to vet. I had one guy, he wanted to vet me as a sponsor. And I told him, we don't do things that way, bud. Your life's in the drain. I'm living on the beach. I'll be more than glad to share with you how life was for me when it sucked, and the things that those people that couldn't spell cat if you spotted them 2 letters had me do. And they got me on the beach. And if you want that, I'll share it with you. But I'm not going to waste your time or my time trying to convince you to do this. And that one group of people you talked about, this is why, folks, when John and Michael and I do one of these things, we only get about 3 questions because I just go on and on. Sorry about that. But if you have those folks that say, I've been in and out of AA and it just doesn't work. Alcoholics Anonymous is one of the worst places in the world to visit. This is a bad place to visit. It's a real miserable life for people that are visiting AA. I met many people that the worst time in their life was when they were sitting in the rooms of AA with 3 months or 6 months of just not drinking. But they weren't taking any of the actions to be changed, and just not drinking left them thinking about they might want to blow their brains out. Alcoholics Anonymous is not a program to just not drink. It's a program for recovery from a spiritual illness called alcoholism. And it's only those people that I've found who stay here are the ones who discover alcohol never was our problem. Our problem is sobriety. I need to find a way to live where I can be comfortable in my own skin and of benefit and service to other people, stone, cold, sober. Restless, irritable, and discontented doesn't happen when I'm drinking. It's when I'm not drinking. The bedevilments in the chapter to the agnostic, afraid of misery and depression, can't seem to be of real help to other people, on and on. That's not when I'm drinking. That's when I'm stone cold dry. I need a program that does for me what alcohol I perceived it to do back when I was drinking it. Only I get a much better set of consequences with recovery than I did with drinking. So I don't know if that answers your question, but this is not a good place to visit. And I've never met people that are in and out of AA. You're either in it or you're out of it. And I know that from experience. But the last thing I'll say on this, read the foreword to the 2nd edition. And he's got a little blurb there with some statistics in it. And he said, of the people who came to AA, it really tried, 50% of them got sober at once and stayed that way. Another 25% got sober after some time. And of the remainder, those who stayed, their lives got better. There is no failure in here. The failure is stopping trying. The most powerful spiritual words that I've ever experienced in my life are in the big book of AA. And those words are try, effort, salt, seek. This is not a program of walking a fine line and you have to do it this way to do it right. It's a program of becoming a seeker. And I had 6 years, 1 month, and 14 days between my first dry date and my current one. And I wouldn't wish that off on anybody, but I'd wish it off on anybody before you died of this illness. So you just keep coming back, and sooner or later, you're going to find an alcoholic that wants to share with you the program of recovery out of the book, and not one of those just don't drink and go to meetings. That's not a program of recovery. Trust God, clean house, and help others. That works pretty damn well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gary K. As always, it is a pleasure spending time with you and all of the listeners that we had on that particular live event. It was absolutely fantastic. Now, keep in mind, that was the first part of Gary K. I'm going to have the second part next week. It'll be Gary K. live on a Q&A session. And what we did, Q&A, that stands for question and answer, just in case somebody didn't quite understand that. You know, sometimes you throw acronyms out there and people don't know what they are, but nonetheless, Q&A, it's popular here in America. And I know we have listeners all throughout the globe, and they may not understand what that is. Nonetheless, let me get on to what I was going to say. So we're going to have a Q&A session. And what we did is we opened up the live session to the various audience members that were present with us and let them ask questions directly to Mr. Gary K. so I could get out of the way and quit asking my questions. And it was absolutely fantastic. You're going to love that episode as well. Now, on to a little bit of listener feedback for Ewans. Michelle writes in. She says, John, I am in Hilton Head, South Carolina. She says, this is a kind of a serious one here. I forgot about this. She says, I was greatly wronged when my husband and our friend started to have an affair. Poor me. My goodness. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Michelle. Anyway, she says, of course, this was all in my head, but just to be sure, I bugged his car, and it turns out there is something about a woman's intuition. They did end it sometime thereafter, but she thought it was a good idea to hide the pregnancy. So the call that said, I just had your baby was a bit of a shocker. Oh my goodness. Telling my then 10 and 12-year-old boys was interesting. The 12-year-old called her an undesirable name, and the 10-year-old said, yay, I have a sister. That started my 4-year nightly pity party with my friend Vinny Blanc. I traded my obsession with catching them to an alcohol obsession. When I started day drinking, I knew it was a problem, so I went to rehab. I am 6 months sober now, and through the fellowship of AA, I have gotten back in touch with my inner, most conceited, selfish, resentful, insecure self, and I am somehow remarkably better for it. Oh my goodness. Wow. She says, I have traded my ATM God for praying for others, even those I resent. Page 552 of the big book. She's talking about the praying for those that you resent. Go look that up. Page 552 of the big book. She said, I found your podcast on Spotify and I have enjoyed all the speakers. Every week I look forward to a new episode. Please keep up the good work, Michelle. So because there were some details in there that I thought that she may not want me to read on air, Michelle, I went ahead and I asked her if it was okay for me to read this particular feedback on the podcast. And she wrote me back. She said, sure, John, feel free. Maybe it will help somebody. And I bet it will, Michelle. I so much better it will. She says, I live in a small community, so anonymity, it is basically impossible, yet enlightening. Cheating is a funny thing. Most people knew or suspected, but nobody made that much of a deal out of it. And then you add a baby and friends and family into the mix, and they ran for the hills. Many making sure to give their infinite wisdom / advice before disappearing. Please let your viewers know, I think she means your listeners know, that if they are ever in Hilton Head, our clubhouse, YANA, which stands for, it's an acronym, folks, which stands for You Are Not Alone, is still open for meetings with mask and social distancing. So, well, we're letting them know. And if anyone's ever in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and they want a meeting, at least nowadays, you can go to the clubhouse called YANA, YANA. Could be YANA. You Are Not Alone. And Michelle, thank you for your vulnerability. I sure do appreciate that. Bill writes in, and Bill says, by the way, this is Bill L., not Bill C or anyway, any of the other bills we have. He says, this is Bill L. I'm on my second installment of sobriety, 22 years the first time and 14 years this time. Wow, Bill, that's quite a lot of experience there. He says, I am from Elliott Lake, Ontario, Canada. By the power of the internet and COVID, my home group is 2,000 miles away on the West Coast. Don't recall how I came to find Sober Speak. However, I love the format of the interviewing. Puts a whole new dimension into a speaker meeting. Yeah, so, that's interesting you say that, Bill, because when I first started this, one of my thoughts was, I love speaker meetings and I love listening to people's stories, but I can tell you, from a selfish perspective, there are many times I hear people saying something and I want to go, whoa, wait, let's talk about that a little bit more. Can you dive into that? So it just gave me a chance to interrupt people at a speaker meeting, basically. Anyway, Bill says, usually I listen to the car and I have not had a chance to write down the episodes that really resonated with me. There have been many. I believe I just finished episode number 24. It got me thinking about living in the moment and how to use my power of choice wisely. Anyway, I'm presently unemployed, so I send out bits of money here and there. Oh, he made a contribution. Thank you, Bill. Anyway, I just appreciate it. Here and there to areas that help me day to day. And Sober Speak has become a car ride favorite for me. I hope you have a grand year. Thanks again, Bill. Well, thank you, Bill. I sure do appreciate you writing in. Ronnie writes in and she says, thank you so much for your service. From the bottom of my Al-Anon heart, your podcast helps me carry on. With love and gratitude, Ronnie. Well, Ronnie, right back out to your Al-Anon heart with love and gratitude coming right back out to you. I really appreciate you writing in, appreciate your support. I appreciate you listening in. Charla writes in, love that name, Charla. It sounds like a Southern name, but I think she's written in before, and I think she's from Ohio or something like that. In fact, yeah, she did. On this one, it says Charla from Ohio. All right, she says, hi, John. I'm Charla. She says, I guess that would be Charlotte, actually, is what I'm thinking of in the Southern terms. But nonetheless, Charla sounds very similar to Charlotte for me. And my guess is she's been called that before. Nonetheless, I've been a grateful member of Al-Anon since January of 2019. I love that the Al-Anons listen to this so much. I just absolutely love it. And boy, do I have a family tree chock full of qualifiers. A family tree chock full of qualifiers. She says, I live in Dayton, Ohio. Yes, here you go. And I found your podcast a little under 2 years ago on Apple Podcasts and started listening to Sober Speak and the recovery show simultaneously in the spring of 2019. She's talking about my friend Spencer over there on the recovery show. And she goes on, much to my surprise and delight, you and Spencer were already connected. Yes, you and your guests have been with me every day since then to and fro work. Your podcast has played a huge role in supporting me through my recovery. She says, I love, big underline, big capital letters, AA, Al-Anon, and the spirituality of the programs. All your speakers have given me more hope than I showed up for before each podcast. John, I would not be here today without this program. I'm sure she's talking about Al-Anon, and hope one day my story can offer courage, strength, and hope to others. Well, it's doing that right now, Miss Charla. She says, my entire life, since my first memory, I remember feeling like I was homesick, even while I was at home. It's hard to explain that feeling, but I guess you could say I feel empty, hollow, or like something was just missing, important, but I didn't even know what, quote, it was. My tragedies have struck my family since I was a very young girl. I learned to survive under a blanket of untreated alcoholism, Al-Anons, and other traumas that I just thought were normal life. Now I'm learning to, quote, unsurvive and start thriving. Good for you, Charla. I hit my rock bottom when my kids and I left home after an intense fight with my husband, their stepfather. We left and lived in the basement of my friend's house for about 5 weeks until I could get a small place for us to rent. I was so sad and deflated, mentally, physically, and emotionally. I was on my last ounce of life. This was it. I finally broke. I couldn't fix any of this, and I felt responsible for everything that went wrong. I can still feel my heart physically aching as I cried out for help into the night, into the room that night. In my brokenness, I surrendered to my HP. I was laying in the dark, crying on a mattress placed on the floor, and begged for someone or something to tell me what to do next. I was so lost, but willing to do anything at that point to make my pain go away. I entered the rooms of Al-Anon in February of 2019, and my life began to change in a slow but big way. Life didn't get easier, but I gained support and became stronger. I am working with a sponsor and currently studying and working my way through steps 6 and 7. What a beautiful program we have. I cannot express my gratitude toward you and every single guest on your podcast. Y'all make me want to move to Texas. See, I knew she was Southern, double exclamation point. I've heard you speak about the conference in Crested Butte, Colorado, and I have truly haven't stopped dreaming about making it there one day. Well, you know, I would love to meet you and, gosh, so many of you at that conference. It would be fantastic. I could tell you that the Crested Butte conference for this summer, just so you know, Charla, and anybody else who's interested in it, is still up in the air for July or August of this year coming up, right? Obviously, it's COVID. We don't know exactly where that's going. But anyway, I hope to meet you and your family there one day. She says, thank you for your service. I love your sense of humor and your vulnerability. I know we've never met, but I consider you all my extended family. Well, thank you, Charla. And right back at you. I consider you part of my extended family as well. She says, hope to meet some of you one day, or maybe join a meeting with you and some of your guests. Please feel free to send me some great virtual meetings if you think about it. Best, Charla from Ohio. Okay, so a couple things. Thank you so much, Charla, for writing in. That was an absolutely wonderful email. I really appreciate it. And God bless you and your journey and your sponsor and your group and everybody that is involved with you along the way. In terms of the virtual meetings. If you go to our website, the Super Secret Facebook group, and if you're not in there, once again, send me your email, john@soberspeak.com, and I will get you in. I will send you an invite out to that. And, in terms of the live meetings that we have, once again, I'm probably doing those once a quarter, maybe even more than that now. The next time I have a live meeting, I will definitely send out an invite to it. You're on my email list and you'll get an email saying, hey, we're going to have a live meeting coming up. And, I'd love to quote, see you in there, right? We all have our cameras on and get to mingle with each other. So thank you, Charlotte, for writing in. Melanie writes in and she says, hello, John. I'm a teacher from London. Hello, Melanie. I wonder if this is Mel B writing in. Just kidding. It's not Mel B. Not everybody named Melanie in England is Mel B. I'm sorry. I crack myself up sometimes. She says, hello, John. I'm a teacher from London. I've been teaching psychology for a few years now and have 3 children. I'm a single parent, and that's how I like it to be. A dog and a cat, too. I absolutely love listening to your podcast in bed before I go to sleep at night. Listening to firsthand accounts of a road to sobriety always motivates me to stay on the straight and narrow. My stop date was the 28th of May, 2020. I had a blip in July. Now, I've never heard it called a blip. She means a little bit of a slip there. And she says, I had a blip in July and found the new year quite challenging as I come from an Irish family of drinkers. But that's another story. Hello, Melanie. Anyway, I tried to go into an Irish accent very quickly, but I couldn't do it. I'm sorry. I'm really bad at this stuff. She says, oh, by the way, Melanie, when I do at the beginning of the podcast and I say plenty listener feedback at the end, that is my tip of the hat to all the Irish men and women out there, which Ireland is the birthplace of alcoholism. I'm just kidding. I got that from Phil C. Nonetheless, she says, there was a speaker who resonated with me that I listened to his story twice, once in bed and the next whilst. I love it when the Australians and the English use that word. While is what we say over here in the States. Whilst cycling, and I cried both times, and for the life of me, I cannot remember his name. He also did drugs, and his grandmother died, and said that when he first went into NA, they said he'd have to give up drinking and go to AA, but he thought, F that. So instead, continued down that self-destructive path for many years. Maybe his name was Steve. I'd like to listen to him again, or I'll have to search him out. He got me quite emotional. She says, I've had so many stories, and I'd like to one day sit back and talk about it. Maybe I should start a journal, because you see, for so many years, I've been telling my stories, but only to people who have been drunk or too high to care. Oh, she says, thanks for your talk. They cheer me up, and I'd love to imagine what you look like. Send me a photo. Take care and God bless. Melanie X. Well, Melanie, I don't know. I just, I don't send photos of myself. Who knows? You could be sorely disappointed, but thank you for writing in. I appreciate it. But you can do when you come to our live meetings. If you come to our live meetings that we have the cameras turned on, and you can enjoy my mug for like an hour and a half if you so chose to do so. But I'd rather you be looking at the guest who's actually doing the talking. But nonetheless, I appreciate you writing in, Melanie. I sure do. And by the way, okay, so I just thought about something. I have mentioned this on the pod in the past, but we want to start doing more blogs on our website. And we had Rebecca write in. She actually did a blog she took one of our episodes, which I'd love for anybody to do. She took one of Bill C's episode and she kind of summarized it and wrote, a long blog of, what he talked about during that episode. And it was just kind of, it was a really cool thing. We posted it on our website. If some of you are out there and you want to send in a blog, like Melanie was talking about, I had a sort of journal and I have all these stories, but, basically I've been talking to people who were as drunk as high as I was, they didn't care. But if you want to put that in a format to where, we could maybe post that on the blog, on the website, kind of your story, if you will, just send it to me. We'll review it. I can't guarantee that we'll put it out there. But I would love to see what people have to offer up. But I really would like people to go listen to one of the episodes and make a blog, right? Something that says, okay, this is what so-and-so talked about on episode number 146 or whatever it is, and kind of make an outline of it. So because some people learn better through reading, and I would love to have that as a place where people can come to on our website and actually read through those valid points that were brought up on an actual episode. Anyway, that's the end of the episode. Thank you all for coming in again. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. Love you guys, and I really appreciate you spending time with us. I will most likely be back next week. I take this 1 week at a time. Until then, enjoy your day or whatever. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. Bye-bye.